Final item of business today is the members' business debate on motion number 8431 in the name of John Wilson on 12 days of Detmous Credit Union campaign. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would be very grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could press the request to speak buttons now. I call on John Wilson to open the debate. Maximum 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would like to thank the members across political parties who signed my members' motion and are here tonight to listen to this debate. And I should declare at this point, Presiding Officer, and refer members to my register of interest. My interest in credit unions is long-standing, although it has been clearly assisted by virtue of the fact that I am currently the convener of the cross-party group on credit unions in the Parliament. This in many ways is a timely debate, and it's one of these debates that, like buses, Edinburgh Corporation buses, 3 come along in a week, because I'm grateful to Kezia Dugdale's members' debate last Thursday lunchtime, which is part of this overall discussion about debt and how we deal with debt in Scotland today. The debate also acknowledges important work undertaken by the Scottish Government, not least in terms of its 12 Days of Detmous campaign. It is vital that the role of credit unions and the approach taken by them is looked at in contrast to payday lending firms. The whole thrust of the campaign, with an emphasis on people not being pressured, especially at this time of year, into taking out expensive loans, especially high-interest, short-term loans at the expense of good financial decision-making. Only last week, Ofcom stated that television viewers were exposed to nearly 400,000 payday loan adverts last year alone. In 2011, there were 243,000 such adverts, although within the space of a year, this has increased by 64%. Therefore, the Scottish Government campaign at this festive period is essential in offering some serious balance in terms of engaging with the public. Furthermore, according to the Minister's statement this afternoon in the earlier debate, almost 18,000 people have visited the campaign website, with almost 1,300 having engaged in internet searches for their local credit union. It is important that the Financial Conduct Authority, which takes over regulation of payday loans in April, looks at the issues of advertising and especially the issue of pester power, with Ofcom stating that on average children watched over 70 adverts from payday lenders. It is important to recognise that credit unions have evolved over the years and that credit unions are expanding and growing. In many ways, I come to today's debate from the background of witnessing firsthand the work of credit unions do within Central Scotland. I regularly try and meet up with credit unions throughout Central Scotland during the year and find out what new developments are taking place. The work that credit unions do in Central Scotland is assisted by the fact that credit unions can demonstrate a real difference for many communities and get people, especially in deprived areas, to develop the necessary savings habits consistent with good credit union practice. In contrast to the position of payday lending, then credit unions need the necessary framework to develop in a practical sense. Credit unions are distinct bodies. They are both large and small in nature and operation. What we must ensure is that smaller credit unions are given the necessary support to provide the assistance which their current and future members need in order to deliver real benefits to those who need it. Furthermore, while we talk about the necessary expansion and the offering of more services, we must also recognise that volunteers and staff working in credit unions need to be upskilled in order to meet the requirements of a growing sector.
Kezia Dugdale.
I'm sure that John Wilson would agree that there are some credit unions who simply don't want to be involved in offering an alternative payday loans, and nothing about what we create or ask them to do should force them to do that either.
John Wilson.
I thank Kezia Dugdale for that intervention, and it's a point I'll try and deal with later on. Accredited training programmes could offer staff and volunteers the opportunity to be credited with meaningful qualifications to progress the credit union and individuals' development. It is my understanding that the Scottish League of Credit Unions have been discussing such a matter with SQA and hope to move this forward in the new year. The sector is relatively small when you compare it to the US or Australia, where credit unions are serving almost one-third of the country's populations. It has to be welcomed that many employers support credit union membership to employees while in employment. I know a good many employers that do that here, but that needs to be promoted more robustly. The potential of credit unions has been recognised by both the Scottish and UK governments, emphasising the role they can play in countering payday loan companies. I would like to acknowledge the good work credit unions do in encouraging people that save and take out loans with them, as a real alternative to expensive payday loan lenders. Although it is worth saying that figures from Step Change Debt Charity stated that the average monthly income of a Step Change client in Scotland with a payday loan was £1,190, although the average payday loan debt was currently standing at £1,400. With this level of monthly repayments leaving people with no money for living and push them further into debt, it must be remembered that behind these statistics there is a human face to these financial pressures. Credit unions can take a longer-term view rather than be short-term fix in its approach when compared to existing banks or building societies. The Glasgow Credit Union has recognised the real problems in the traditional banking sector and is now able to offer mortgages to members that is particularly tailored to second steppers. And that brings on the point that Kezia Dugdale has raised, that not all credit unions have the financial wherewithal to provide those types of loans. And we have to recognise, we have to cater for both the large and small credit unions that exist. The Scottish Government, in terms of its new banking strategy, recognises that credit unions can and should compete with commercial banks in the financial services sector. I am aware that the regulations of financial services are a reserved matter. The Scottish Government clearly has a role in developing solutions, particularly with regard to legal matters, which has an impact on credit unions, and also ensuring the partnership role can be maintained. I recognise the good work taking place by credit unions throughout central Scotland, but also beyond that boundary. I welcome the fact that the Scottish Government has placed a high priority on assisting credit unions, delivering not only an alternative, but also offering mainstream financial provision that will assist many communities throughout Scotland. However, we must
ask you to wind up.
However, we must ensure that credit unions have the resources and support to play a meaningful role into the future. Thank you.
Many thanks. I'm afraid the debate is heavily subscribed and I may not be able to call everyone since I can't extend the debate this evening. Kezia Dugdale to be followed by Roderick Campbell. And if members could take less than 4 minutes, I would be obliged.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I first of all point members to my register of interest, where I'm a member of Capital Credit Union, and also congratulate John Wilson on securing the debate. It is indeed the third time in the space of a week we've been able to debate some of the issues around payday loans, and I think that's to be greatly welcomed. Can also commend him for the role that he plays in the cross-party group for credit unions, and look forward to joining him on that journey going forward. I also very much welcome the 12 Days of Debtmas campaign. You might not be surprised to hear that, given that I asked the Scottish Government to run a campaign against payday loan companies, specifically in the run-up to Christmas. And I first asked the Scottish Government to do this on the 29th of May 2012, where I wrote to Fergus Ewing asking him to run a publicity campaign against payday loan companies, and he wrote back saying it would not be appropriate for the Scottish Government to undertake an advertising campaign to advise the public of the issues in the high-interest short-term loan market. Not being somebody who takes no for an answer, Presiding Officer, I wrote back to the Minister again in August 2012, and I received a similar reply again, where the Scottish Government said it's not appropriate for the Scottish Government to discourage people from obtaining credit which is offered to them in a legal, fair and transparent way. So last week, I must say it was with a wry smile that I very much enjoyed listening the Finance Minister say to Parliament it's the Scottish Government's view that uncontrolled growth of payday lending in Scotland has been one of the causes of extreme social misery and hardship in our times. And I think actually he needs to give credit to the thousands of people across the country who have been actively campaigning campaigning against payday loans for several years now, because they've put this issue on the agenda. The Minister hasn't always been a die-hard opponent to payday loans, and to suggest otherwise, I'm afraid, does this debate a disservice. But I do very much welcome what he's doing, and I would ask him to think about what happens after Christmas. This campaign shouldn't just be for Christmas. A lot of families experience tremendous debt and pain, financial pain, in January, because that's a month when all the bills come in. One issue I would like to put to the Minister today is he'll remember when we last met in June of this year, June 2013, I put to the Minister a proposal for a loan guarantee fund that I had written jointly with ABCO, and I asked the Minister to consider that. This was a proposal which would help credit unions develop their capacity to grow and offer an alternative to payday loan companies. He promised me an answer to that proposal by the end of June 2013. The summer came and went, and I thought about challenging the Minister to see if he had come up with a response to that, and I spoke to a number of people in the credit union sector who asked me not to do that because they'd heard some very warm soundings from the Minister's department and people that he works with that this was an issue that he was taking very seriously. I've not heard anything yet, Presiding Officer. It's been 6 months since the Minister said he would give a response to my loan guarantee fund. I'm sorry, Mr Mackenzie, I have less than 4 minutes now. I'm desperately trying to please the Presiding Officer here. I guess what I'm trying to say to the Minister is if he doesn't think the loan guarantee fund is a good idea, if he doesn't think that's the answer to improving credit unions' capacity to offer the alternative, then I would urge him very strongly to come to the Chamber and lay out a route map, lay out a series of ideas and ways that we can help credit unions who want to offer a credible alternative payday loans to do so, because at the moment they are seeing tremendous numbers of people come through their doors, people who have heard the 12 Days of Debtmas campaign on the airwaves who want to join a credit union. But there's a great fear amongst the credit unions who desperately want to do this work that they cannot meet that capacity, that they cannot fulfil the potential they have to offer an alternative, and they're looking to their government for answers. Presiding Officer, I'll just leave it there to save you some time, but I think the challenge to the Minister goes on into 2014. I look forward to hearing the answers that he has. Thank you.
Many thanks. I call Roger Campbell to be followed by Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I congratulate John Wilson on securing this debate and Kezia Dugdale for securing her members' business debate last week, and may I apologise to the Chamber I may not be able to stay to the end of the debate. It's obvious that these two items are inextricably linked. As suggested by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, credit unions can compete out of existence payday loan companies. And one of the key reasons behind the Debtmas campaign is to entice people away from these high-interest, modern-day Shylocks, if I may use that term, offering too good to be true instant cash deals. We all know of the drawbacks associated with companies such as Wonga, whose chief executive admitted in 2010 that their practices would be classified as illegal in some countries, and who will charge on occasion £6.57 to borrow £1 for 1 day. However, people taking out these loans do so because of an urgent short-term cash crisis. Regardless of the sum being taken out, it is a zero-sum game for the customer, and one in which only the loan company can win, particularly with the exorbitant fees they charge. Whilst we would all welcome substantially stricter regulations on these companies, this unfortunately remains a power reserved to Westminster. However, even if the UK government acted on this, there is no point in doing so in isolation. This would be bolting the stable door after the horse has bolted. We clearly need alternative money lending and credit schemes that don't cynically target those in need of help in order to make a fast buck. These exist, but they need to be more widely advertised and available. I'm therefore delighted that the Scottish Government has followed up on the members' business debate from January this year, in which a number of my colleagues asked the Government to support credit unions, and has launched its 12 Days of Debtmas campaign, encouraging people to ignore payday loan companies' advances and indeed consider other options, including the services of credit unions. We all know that money can get tight around Christmas, with extra money being spent on heating, presents or perennial nights out. It all adds up and can leave many families struggling into the new year when they know it will be 5 or 6 weeks until payday. Combating the multi-million-pound business of payday loans, which, as John Wilson has already mentioned, 400,000 adverts were broadcast last year, with adults seeing on average 152 and children 70 of them, will be very difficult. But spreading the message that there are alternatives is essential, and promoting the fairer, cheaper alternative of credit unions is worthwhile. Whilst I doubt that credit unions run to the same ethos as George and Mary Bailey's Building and Loan Association in the iconic film It's a Wonderful Life, where they famously offered people their own honeymoon money after a run on the banks, credit unions are undoubtedly a better alternative than those of payday lenders. Almost 1,500 people and counting already asked for details of local credit unions as a direct result of the Debt Mass campaign, including North East Fife's credit union, which is fully regulated by the FCA and operates out of Cooper in Springfield. Without credit unions, people would face an impossible choice: an unapproved overdraft extension, which will incur expensive charges, or a payday loan, which will also incur very expensive charges. I'm certain that every one of us here today will have had constituents approach them with money problems. I'm pleased that I can point my constituents to a local credit union who may be able to assist them, but disappointed by the number of people on low incomes who say that banks won't help them. Perhaps if more organisations paid a living wage and we could ensure a fairer lending system in Scotland, we would then see far fewer people struggling for money at Christmas and throughout the year. Credit unions, however, fulfil a very real need, and I am pleased to be able to support this motion today. Thank you.
Many thanks. And I now call Rhoda Grant, to be followed by Alex Johnston.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to congratulate John Wilson for securing the debate. Indeed, it's timely to have this debate in the run-up to Christmas, where people are under huge pressure to buy gifts and expensive food to make Christmas special for their families. The key aim of the debate is encouraging people to use credit unions instead of payday lenders. With wages falling and prices rising, there are very few and only the very rich who are better off. The poorest in our society are really bearing the brunt of this, and we have a fourfold increase of food banks struggling to meet the needs of the people in our communities. Areas such as the Highlands and Islands, where employment can be seasonal or temporary, are at high risk of payday loan debt because banks are reluctant to lend to people who don't have a secure income. Those who lend will charge inflated rates of interest to the worst off. Only last month it was revealed that in Skye, Lochaber and Badenoch constituency in the Highlands, it has the second highest level of individual payday loan debt in Scotland. The average payday loan debt across the whole of Scotland is around £1,398.07, while in Skye, Lochaber and Badenoch it can be around £2,418.50, over £1,000 more than the average. Payday lenders charge astronomical rates of interest, and they very quickly become affordable, and this leads people to roll over their debt. They can also take repayments direct out of a borrower's bank account and have no regard whatsoever to what that borrower will then live on. I recently issued a Debtbusters survey to homes in Wick in the Highlands and Islands. The results indicated that around 90% of respondents were supportive of the campaign to increase awareness around the risk of using payday companies, of the promotion of credit unions and of the increasing awareness of where to get debt advice. However, only 9% of those responding told me they were actually members of a credit union themselves. And credit unions do provide an alternative. All other lenders increase interest rates to the least well-off. Credit unions treat people the same. In the Highlands and Islands, we have a credit union that covers the whole area, High Scot. It's a community-based financial cooperative owned and run and controlled by its own members. Membership now stands at over 2,000. And interest in the credit union is continuing to grow. Since it was first established about 6 years ago, they now offer a range of products from prepayment debit cards that can be used in shops and at cash machines to short and medium-term loans at preferential rates alongside savings schemes and indeed life insurance. We all have a role in promoting credit unions, and I very much hope that the Scottish Government will offer support to these organisations so they can provide their valuable service to those who desperately need it, especially this Christmas.
Many thanks. And I now call Alex Johnston, to be followed by Jackie Bailey.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I begin by congratulating John Wilson on bringing this issue to the Chamber? It's a timely moment in the year to discuss the issue of household debt and how we might deal with it. However, when we look at the broader issue of borrowing, and particularly domestic borrowing, it has to be said that quite often, and I think I've said it myself in this chamber before, it's ironic that those who don't need the money are the ones who can get it most cheaply, and those who need it most are the ones who find it most expensive or almost impossible to find. The result is that many people are forced into the hands of payday lenders, but I believe that is also a function of the marketplace in which we find ourselves today, and that is not something which is beyond the powers of politicians even to influence. First of all, going back to what John Wilson said in his opening remarks, in places like the United States of America, up to a third of the population now have accounts with credit unions. And that's not because they have a particular demand for it, it's because the credit union sector has developed more quickly and more effectively in that part of the world. The result is that those of us in this country who might find ourselves reliant on banks or credit cards or payday lenders in the worst possible cases do have an alternative. As we look at the way financial institutions have developed over hundreds of years, we see that some of the smallest and at the formation most insignificant organisations have gone on to become some of the largest banks in the world. We've also seen, unfortunately perhaps, our building society sector, which had a key role at one time, largely absorbed by the banks, which then, of course, misused their position and found themselves having to be bailed out by public funds. I believe that the credit union sector has tremendous potential, and it has that in two particular ways. Firstly, it has the capacity to develop its market, to find ways to provide loans for people who need them and have no alternative, but to do so at a rate which is competitively economic. But the second and most important role, I believe, is the opportunity it has to influence and to educate those who at the moment cannot find credit anywhere else and cannot do so because of their own borrowing record. By taking the opportunity to bring people into the fold, to give them the education which is necessary to be financially more responsible, and then allow them to go forward and take advantage of that better credit rating they've achieved to participate in the broader market, is a bonus which many credit unions could in the long term afford. In closing, can I also congratulate the Scottish Government for its 12 Days of Debtmas document, which I have in front of me. I downloaded it from the internet, and that must have taken a team quite a while to come up with all these suggestions. But nevertheless, it's something which people need to take seriously. At this time of year, we have to remember that Christmas is about many things, and it's not necessarily about conspicuous consumption. But it's our duty here in this Parliament to concern ourselves about how we might best serve those people who find themselves in debt at this difficult time of year. And I support the motion in the name of John Wilson.
Thank you. And I now call Jackie Bailey, to be followed by Mike Mackenzie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and let me also start by adding my congratulations to John Wilson for securing this debate and for his thoughtful and considered speech. This debate, as others have mentioned, follows the excellent debate last week led by my colleague Kes Dugdale on the regulation of payday lenders. And I think it would be fair to say that Kes has led the Debt Busters campaign in Scotland to considerable effect, highlighting the scandal of payday lending, with companies charging extortionate rates of interest and taking advantage of people in recouping that loan. Clearly, in the case of the Minister, persistence works, and I would encourage him to not wait quite so long in the future before responding to her letters and emails and suggestions. But in the past year, a number of payday lenders have sprung up in my local area. It's about the only growth in the high street. They charge APRs of almost 4,000%, which is frankly outrageous. I know we are facing a huge cost of living crisis of a kind that we haven't seen for very many decades indeed. Incomes are declining in real terms, costs are rising by something like over 30% in the last 5 years, and people are in difficulty. There are alternatives, but we do need to do more to raise awareness and point people in the right direction. So I very much welcome the Scottish Government's 12 Days of Debtmas campaign, highlighting the valuable role played by credit unions in providing access to low-interest loans. I have two credit unions in my area, Dumbarton Credit Union and the Vale of Leven Credit Union, and both of them do a fantastic job. Rooted very much in their communities, credit unions are member-owned cooperatives. They're about developing a responsible approach to money and encouraging all of us to save. Loans from credit unions are low interest, they're usually repayable over a long period, and credit unions are growing all the time. With 108 credit unions across Scotland, some based on a workplace, some based on where you live, there are as many as 350,000 people who have joined. But you know, there is so much more potential, and I want to explore that with the Minister. But let me digress for a minute and talk about the House of Commons, where today Gareth Thomas MP has a 10-minute rule motion which seeks to create a credit union for military personnel who are increasingly turning to payday loans to get by. And can I hope that SNP MPs, indeed Conservative MPs, will support this, because I think this is particularly important. But in my local area, we asked the Council to advertise a credit union on the council tax notices received by every household. This is something they're considering. We've asked them to promote the Super Savers scheme, giving every primary school child a credit union account with a small sum of money, say £10, to kick off their saving habit. This, coupled with financial education provided by the credit union, can be a very powerful tool to change habits in that next generation. So a small sum of money could actually stop a future spiral into debt. So the Scottish Government should consider ways of promoting credit unions, perhaps on television, radio, that would support that local activity. Yes, at this time of year, but actually all year round. Now, I recall the previous Scottish Executive having in place a credit union development plan, unlocking the potential, backed by considerable resources. I suspect this Scottish Government have also provided funding. But you know, if we're to make a quantum difference to financial exclusion, then we need to do much more to sustain credit unions. What specific measures will the Minister take to do so? In the short term, what about providing credit unions with assistance with a loan guarantee fund to enable them to offer more instant loans? But in the long term, how can we encourage community credit unions to actually have people from all walks of life as their members? I look forward to the Minister, in the spirit of Christmas, outlining the further measures he will take now to support credit unions.
Thank you very much. And to call Mike Mackenzie, who will be followed by Jane Baxter.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to congratulate John Wilson for securing this debate. The timing is perfect because, as Charles Dickens famously realised, the festive season is a time when we should consider those who are vulnerable or in difficulty. And it's a time when the contrast between the haves and the have-nots in our society is rendered in stark terms. It's a time when the engine of consumerism is at maximum revs, and it's a time when already stretched budgets are under severe pressure. It's no surprise then that people are driven to borrow at this time of year, and it's no surprise when the high street banks won't offer facilities to those with slender resources that people turn to other sources of credit, and it's no surprise that payday lenders are ready to pounce on such unsuspecting and vulnerable borrowers. And I would just ask, particularly the Labour members we've heard speaking this evening, this is what 300 years of the Union has brought us to. This is what the failure of the UK Government to regulate the payday industry has brought us to. But thankfully there's an alternative. Credit unions offer unsecured lending in a responsible and fair-minded way. Loan applications can be fast and they can be done online, but they're always accompanied by prudent advice. And there's always a system of checking to make sure that loans are affordable for the borrower. This is the essence of responsible lending, and it's by following responsible lending practices that the cost of borrowing can be kept to a minimum. But, Presiding Officer, credit unions offer far more than unsecured lending. They encourage saving, offering a variety of saving products, because saving, even saving modest but regular amounts, is perhaps the best way to help meet expenses like those we are all faced with during the festive season. And saving is the best way to lay in a contingency fund to deal with those emergencies that we all face from time to time when some ready cash is necessary. So saving is the way to get out of the debt cycle and ahead of the game. And in researching for this debate, I found out that some credit unions, and members have referred to this, some of them even offer mortgages, and that they are therefore offering a full and a comprehensive alternative to high street banks, with the difference being that they are not solely motivated in chasing high and unsustainable profits. This ethos is all important, and it's what ensures that a careful balance will always be struck in delivering a sympathetic and a responsible service for savers and for borrowers. Presiding Officer, in conclusion, I am delighted that the Scottish Government launched the 12 Days of Debt Mask campaign to foster a greater awareness of credit unions, which offer a much better alternative than payday loans and, in many cases, a better service than high street banks. The more people who use credit unions, the more they will grow. And the more they grow, the more people can benefit from their excellent range of financial services.
Thank you. And finally, in the open debate, I call Jane Baxter.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I should begin by declaring an interest. I'm a councillor in Fife. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate, and I'd like to add my support to John Wilson's motion. Through my work on the Debt Busters campaign in Fife, I know the misery brought about by payday loan companies and the excellent work credit unions do to alleviate that misery. As the changes to welfare start to bite, individuals and families will face increasingly basic choices. And it's the basic choices which are the most difficult, the most unfair, like whether to feed their children or themselves, like whether to pay off the loan which they took out last month to pay the electric bill or pay the electric bill this month. Scotland has the highest level of payday loan debt in the UK, with people from Mid-Scotland and Fife owing an average of £1,200. These people aren't irresponsible or financially incompetent. It's just not possible to stretch the money from one month to the next without help. Citizens Advice Scotland recently published research which looks at payday lending. Loans are often given to people who have been refused credit elsewhere, and they can come with interest rates as high as 4,000%. What can seem like a lifesaver one day can turn into a nightmare the next. People are struggling, and as public sector cuts start to take hold, the number of people needing to borrow to survive will increase. Mainstream consumer credit has become increasingly difficult to access, and this means that the speed at which people can access easy, in inverted commas, loans can seem an attractive option. They tide you over for the last few days of the month in the 15 seconds it takes to apply. But if we want people to know what the real cost of payday loans are, we have to make sure they know what support is available to them. And that's not about patronising people. It's not about blaming them. It's about making sure they know what they're entitled to and how to maximise their income. I've recently been working very closely with the Co-op Party in Fife to take forward the Debt Busters campaign. Debt Busters tries to help people keep out of debt and support those who get into debt by signposting alternatives like credit unions. Its biggest success so far has been to secure the Scottish Government's support for wealth warnings to the dangers of payday loans in the 12 Days of Debt Mask campaign, which we're debating today. And we've taken the Debt Busters campaign out and about in Fife. We've visited several towns in Fife with our roadshow, and we've been handing out information about credit unions, where to get advice if you're in debt, and just pointing out some reality checks about payday loans. And we've been astonished at the response we've had. I've had GPs coming up to me in the high street and saying, "Can I get a pack of your postcards? I could put these in my surgery if people need them." We've had people from Gamblers Anonymous coming up to us in the high street saying, "This is a huge issue for us. High street bookies, online gambling, that's fuelling the debt crisis. We need to help our members to help themselves." We've had people from private sector landlords associations coming up saying, "Can I get some of your cards for our tenants because they're struggling?" So the response has been much more widespread than I thought it would be, and people really want to support the Debt Busters campaign because they recognise that there are two gaps. There's a gap in knowledge about where to get help, three gaps really, a knowledge in where to get advice about credit in general, and a gap about where to get knowledge about where credit unions are. And we're lucky in Fife. We've got several credit unions, from small community-based ones to big ones like Kingdom, which serve thousands and thousands of savers. But they've all got the same problem. They all struggle to promote themselves. It's almost like a secret society. And I sometimes think that rich people get cars and banks and poor people have to struggle along with public transport and credit unions. It feels like that a wee bit. So the challenge for us all is to help to promote credit unions. And I think Debt Busters in Fife has shown that there's a real appetite for that. And once we get Christmas out of the way, we'll continue with that fight. But just to get back to Christmas and to conclude, Presiding Officer, kids aren't daft. When the family are struggling to make ends meet, they know. And they don't ask for much for Christmas because they know their parents can't afford much, never mind presents. Perhaps it's those kids who are living in poverty throughout the year but don't want to put their parents under pressure at Christmas who most deserve to be on Santa's nice list. Their parents certainly believe that, and they'd willingly bankrupt themselves to make sure they get a Christmas they deserve, even if that's only a warm house and a nice Christmas lunch. And it's that, not the desire for a Ferrari or a 60-inch telly that drives people to phone the payday loan companies. We can help them. We can take action today to stand side by side with those families who face impossible financial choices at Christmas and every other day of the year. In supporting this motion, we can give people the knowledge to help them avoid the so-called easy fix payday loans and somewhere to turn to that won't lead to the grinding reality of a cycle of inescapable debt. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I thank most members in the debate for their seasonal goodwill with the length of the contributions this evening, and ask the Minister if, in that spirit, I could call on him to respond to the debate with a maximum of 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd begin by thanking John Wilson for proposing this motion and also for all the work that he does in the cross-party group and credit unions, one of the best attended and most active cross-party groups that there is in this Parliament. And this is a great opportunity which members of across the Chamber have taken to highlight the problems, the misery, the unhappiness and the difficulty that can be caused by those who get into unsustainable debt, and most especially debt associated and caused by payday loans. The festive period can be a time of enormous financial strain, obviously, for families throughout the country, with the pressures to buy presents for children and others. And the 12 Days of Debtmas campaign aims to prevent people from getting into debt, especially at this time of year. So the campaign was launched at the Grampian Credit Union in Aberdeen on the 18th of November, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Chief Executive, Joe Matheson, for hosting a very successful launch event, and her staff and volunteers who were there in force, in strength, and had an interesting engagement with them. And during that time, the staff at the credit union were taking calls. They were carrying on during the visit, punctuated by TV cameras, radios and so on, but they were still advising people at that point. So this is a bold campaign. It highlights the dangers of taking out payday loans. Last month, the Money Advice Service published their annual Christmas spending survey results, and they showed that almost 1 in 5 admitted that they were still paying debts for last Christmas, and 6% plan to turn to payday loans to cover the costs this Christmas. Like Rhoda Grant, I save with High Scott, and it's an example of a credit union. This is achieving a great deal, as are many credit unions throughout the country. But sadly, more and more people are turning to payday loans. Step Change helped 30,672 people with payday loan debts, nearly the same as they helped in the whole of 2012. And 800,000 people in Scotland are in serious debt. 800,000 people, Presiding Officer. So plainly, it's vital that we do everything we reasonably can to ensure that people who need to access money and debt advice do so and know where to get it. And I'm very pleased that the credit unions are supportive of the Bankruptcy and Debt Advice Bill, which we just debated. And I very much look forward to that becoming law for the provisions that the credit unions generally welcome therein. Obviously, we take our responsibility for raising awareness very seriously, and that's why we've undertaken not 1 but 3 campaigns this year, Presiding Officer, to prevent people, or seek to prevent people from entering unmanageable debt. As Alex Johnson says, there's no foolproof way of doing this. The power of government is not absolute, and for those that are taking out payday loans at the moment, they won't be listening to this debate, Presiding Officer. So we must remember that out there in the real world, people are making their decisions, rightly or wrongly, and we want to get across to them the alternatives available, and that's why we decided that the 12 Days of Debtmas was a good, popular way of doing that. And I'd like to say that we worked for the second time this year in close partnership with the Daily Record, as we did previously with Dealing with Your Debt publication, and also the television advertising campaign Help Out of the Hole, which raised the awareness of the debt arrangement scheme and directing people to advice rather than payday lending. Now, earlier advised the Chamber Presiding Officer that 18,000 people had responded to the 12 Days of Debtmas campaign. I inadvertently misinformed the Chamber, and you're supposed to put that right as soon as possible. So fortunately, I've got this opportunity so to do right now, because there's 19,000 visitors, not 18,000, to the website, I'm informed. And more than 2,000 people have also searched for details of their credit union. So I think that has been a reasonably solid result. The other point I'd make in response to one of Kes Dugdale's questions was that the second phase of this campaign is to run from the 3rd week in January. So it's not a one-off event. It will take place after Christmas as well. And I think to sustain it in that way is important. The Scottish Government has allocated £250,000 to the campaign for the year, and it's split into these two phases. I should say, Presiding Officer, that we must ensure we get value for money for this. This is taxpayers' money. We must make sure that we evaluate these campaigns and make sure that they are efficacious. That is the purpose of them. There's a reasonable balance to be struck, but we must bear in mind that we need to use the money carefully. But we do have a duty to promote the risks of payday lending in this way, and we will continue so to do. Kes Dugdale asked about the idea of a loan guarantee fund, and we have examined this very closely, and I will write to her with full details about this. It did take some time because we asked the 4 main trade associations to consult their membership and to gather the views. The results were inconclusive and polarised. Members of the Scottish League of Credit Unions remain strongly opposed to the suggestion. The trade associations provided information based on views of 72 credit unions. 37 were supportive of a loan guarantee fund and 35 were not. Now, it may be that the reason for this division, this is not me making a judgment here, but it's possible that many credit unions feel that what they want to inculcate is the ethic of saving and thrift. And therefore, that, for some, is an important factor. In other words, I'll give way in a minute if I have time. Well, actually, I don't think I do. I'm very sorry. But I will write to the member. And I did want to respond because, obviously, she and Jackie Bailey raised this. So I will respond in more detail. We haven't ruled anything out at this stage, so we're happy to consider all advice. But I think there is mixed views. And I think many credit unions feel that there are many other ways that they can be helped in the short and the long term. For example, by encouraging the public sector organisations, the Scottish Government and other bodies to encourage employees to sign up to credit unions. That doesn't involve a great deal of money. That is something that is going on, and I pay credit to those that are doing it. The Bankruptcy and Debt Advice Bill is another short-term measure, but as Mike Mackenzie said, in the long term, I think it would be best, without making this as a political point, given the consensus that exists, that payday loans should be properly regulated if we were able so to do in this chamber. And the first thing that we would do, Presiding Officer, is bring forward a cap on interest, which I believe can be done by April 2014. That really would be something which I think would help those in Christmas 2014 avoid the iniquities of payday loans. I thank all of the members who have taken part in this debate.
Many thanks. And that concludes John Wilson's debate, 12 Days of Detmers Credit Union Campaign. And I now close this meeting of Parliament.